probably the most characteristic element of neoclassicism generally, not only in dress but also in architecture, in painting, in music, in interior design, is simplicity. Simplicity, propriety, neatness. This style is never overloaded, so we have quite restrained decoration of the dress. The dresses tend to be in white or other pale colors, not only for young unmarried women but generally for most women. So you would have woven patterns, classical motifs, sometimes white embroidery, or if you could afford it, silver embroidery. But generally what you have is clean, neat lines. This was, of course, an important mark of status to have a clean white dress. And if you know anything about the state of pavements in the cities, well, it was difficult to keep the dress clean. So that's an important status symbol, to have this clean white dress. Of course, the fabrics were different for winter and for summer. However, many critics of this fashion believed and kind of ridiculed it as a fashion that does not hide much of the body. So you have the images of women like running around almost naked, especially the English caricatures of the French fashions. You have women displaying their buttocks, their breasts, basically running around almost naked, which was also believed to be very harmful for the health, of course, in the colder season. And in fact, there was a notion of what they called the muslin disease. Muslin was a very delicate fabric, popular for summer dresses. So the fashionable ladies could easily catch a cold, which sometimes might even develop into a more serious illness. But generally for winter, heavier cottons and linens and fine wool were more popular, and of course the underwear, there would be more underwear, usually simple underwear, so the kind of underdress or slip like a long chemise, that could be worn not only for modesty but also for warmth. As far as other elements go, they would wear stays. So this kind of early form of corset that did not really clinch the waist, because the waist was not the focal point of this fashion. It would support the bust from below, and first and foremost flatten the stomach. So if the lady wanted to be fashionable, the idea of fashion was really for the rather narrow hips, a kind of girlish, youthful figure, rather than a kind of more curvaceous figure with more pronounced hips or waist. So if you did not have such figure naturally, you could try to achieve it by using the stays. So of course there were some outer garments. They were important for warmth but also for modesty. So first of all kinds of wraps, shawls, mantles, pelerines, cloaks. So something that would add another layer of drapery. These are the most popular outer garments throughout the neoclassical period. But there are other options as well. There are, let's say, 3 or 4 more tailored, structured forms of outer garments. One that was very popular in England was called a spencer. This was a very short jacket, generally the jackets and the outer garments follow the lines of the main dress. So if you have the elevated waistline in the dress, you'll have the elevated waistline in the outer garments as well. So the very short jacket cut on the similar lines to the bodice, but with long sleeves and high neckline. It was basically modeled on a gentleman's riding coat, and there was a story circulated that Lord Spencer, after whom this garment was named, inadvertently started this fashion because he had some accident. Some said he fell off a horse, some said he sat too near the fireplace and he burned the back of his riding coat. So the tails, the back part of the coat, was destroyed, and only the upper part, like the short jacket, remained. And apparently his wife liked it so much that she wanted a garment made along those lines. It became very popular in the winter season. So you have quite a lot of, especially English fashion plates showing ladies wearing those Spencers. They are sometimes in a more lively color than the dress. Sometimes they are worn with those kind of masculine style hats. So they might be used for horse riding as well. We'll talk about horse riding costumes later on. I mentioned the turbans already. They are very popular in England, but generally they are popular because they are just another wrapper. Two more types of outerwear that were popular in the neoclassical period are the pelisse, which is a coat-like garment with a raised waistline and a long, narrow skirt. This was basically a fashion worn for warmth in the winter and autumn. And another name for it, they are very, very similar and sometimes they are used interchangeably, are redingotes. Redingote is a kind of bastardized version of the words riding coat. So this was an English fashion that somehow made it to the continent. They didn't really know English, so they understood it as redingote, and then it went back to England as redingote. There was one particular type of coat for very strong winters, which was a fur coat with silk lining, and it had a Slavic name actually, a vichura, going back to the Russian name vilchura, which was a coat lined originally apparently with wolf fur, but this was just a kind of coat with fur coat with silk lining. These things start to appear in fashion when Napoleonic Wars begin. So when Napoleon had a Russian campaign, some Russian or Polish elements of fashion would be seen in the mainstream fashion. When Napoleon had a Spanish campaign, then some elements of traditional Spanish costume. The same about, let's say, Egypt. When Napoleon's army was in Egypt, everybody was interested in Egypt and Egyptian styles. So we have the Spencer, the pelisse, the redingote, and the vichura. I'll put the names in the glossary, so if you want to know how to spell them, look there. But of course, let me stress again, the most popular type of neoclassical outer garment is a shawl. The genuine cashmere shawls were most wanted, but yeah, the replicas could be used as well. Another popular thing was a kind of narrow shawl, a narrow scarf that was sometimes made of fur or swan's down, and a very famous portrait from this period by Ingres, we met him already, of a young lady called Mademoiselle Rivière, shows her having this kind of fur boa called a tippet. So if you look at her portrait, very high waistline, just below the bust. This is a full dress, so it's short sleeves with long gloves, and she has this fur tippet as a fashion accessory. Perhaps also she could wrap it around her waist, around her neck for added warmth. If you look at her hairstyle, it's very simple and flat, so it was fashionable to have a rather small hair. Small head of hair in the early 19th century. There is also a portrait of this lady's mother called Madame Rivière, and you can see the same fashion adapted to a lady of an older generation. So some things are the same. White dress with very elevated waistline, but she's covering her arms with the shawl, and her hairstyle is a bit more traditional, let's say. There's more visible hair, it's not that flat on the head. If we look at the English portraits, like here, the portraits of the Burney sisters, light colors, light blue or kind of cream off-white, and here they have longer hair, but it's decorated in this kind of classically inspired fashions with curls and ribbons. Curls are very popular at this period, especially in England. They would sometimes be used as a kind of decoration on the sides of the forehead. So there we go. For evening dress, for full dress, the draperies are even longer, so they might have a train. The fashionable evening activities were mostly indoors, so you could enjoy a train without really the risk of soiling it. So there we go. And so until the fall of Napoleon, we really have especially in France, we have the neoclassical dresses in white collar, small caps or small bonnets, and those shawls or similar draperies. Then we have something interesting happening first in England, and then it kind of spills over. This is perhaps the moment when English and French fashions start to differ more, because the English fashions start to reflect the growing fascination with other periods of history than ancient Greece and Rome. The contemporaries would call it a Gothic style. It could be a medieval inspiration, but it could include anything historicizing other than the classical antiquity. So the Tudor, Elizabethan, Stuart features, so the 16th century, the 17th century, just as well as the medieval inspirations. So what starts to be seen slightly later on is the change in the structure of the skirt. Rather than being a loose flowing drapery, we start having a kind of elongated triangle, so it's more structured, it's more tailored. So we have the elongated triangle with more and more hem decorations. So the horizontal decorations at the bottom of the skirt, they emphasize the horizontal lines. So we have the first interest in the horizontality to counteract this very vertical, classical fashion. So we have those hemlines, which could be decorated with a band of embroidery or small flounces. And we start having something interesting happening to the sleeves, especially the upper part of the sleeves, like small puffs that will really give rise to the romantic fashions. They appear in bodices, they appear in pelisses and spencers. So the emphasis on the shoulders, initially it's a small puff, but this is the style that will really grow. More elaborate hairstyles, slightly more elaborate hairstyles, and more elaborate bonnets. The quite characteristic Regency bonnets in the English fashion have a relatively small brim but a high crown. You will see them in the fashion plates. They were an option. You could still wear those typical neoclassical, close-fitting, small Grecian bonnets. But if you wanted, and this is something that young women who are a bit tired with all those restrained fashions of neoclassicism might choose, was to have those high-crowned bonnets that were more decorative. They might be additionally decorated with flowers, real or artificial, or ribbons or lace or something like that. Also the collars. The collars start to be visible, and they are historicizing collars. Something from the Elizabethan period perhaps, or something from the Stuart period. So the 16th and 17th century, you start really having these elements. These things are ridiculed by cartoonists, and this is the moment when British and French cartoonists start making fun of the fashions from the other side of the channel. So according to the English cartoonists, the French basically run around naked. According to the French cartoonists, the English run around dressed in completely ridiculous and ugly clothes with ridiculously low waists and kind of flattened busts and silly sleeves with panels. This is something that you also start noticing. Not yet very pronounced, but this is something that will be visible later on. So in the beginning of the second decade of the 19th century, like 1812, 1813, you start really having those elements beside the other more typical neoclassical elements, and beside those exotic things like the Spanish costumes or the Polish costumes and such things. There is even a very interesting caricature that shows two sides at the same time. So the French as seen by the English and the English as seen by the French. I hope you can see the difference in the positioning of the waist, in the shape of the skirts, in the collars, in the bonnets. So there you go. Some more things here. For example, here we have an object. It's not a mystery object. It's quite easy to guess what this is. This was called a quizzing glass. So if a lady had short sight and she wanted to help her eyesight without resorting to wearing glasses, which was very unfashionable. She could use this kind of necklace with a monocle. So if she wanted to read, let's say, or if she wanted to look far, she could use this fashion accessory of a quizzing glass. Here we have the glasses themselves, and here we have actually a portrait of an English lady wearing a very typical neoclassical dress with a pelerine, so very, very typical fashion, with a quizzing glass as an accessory, as a piece of jewellery. So there you go, and we continue in a moment.